Using a 22mm socket, let's go ahead and remove these lug nuts. Next, remove the wheel. Go ahead and set that aside. Grab the wheel. Go ahead and turn it away like this here. It's going to give us better access to the 10mm bolt right here holding the ABS sensor in place. Go ahead and remove this bolt. Gently try and wiggle that sensor out and set that aside. Grab your caliper and the rotor and rotate it the opposite way. On the back side of the caliper and the bracket, there are two 18mm bolts. Let's go ahead and remove those. Go ahead and take that bolt out, set it aside, and go ahead and loosen the upper bolt. Now when you go to remove the caliper, start by removing that bolt there, set it aside. You're going to be removing the complete caliper, bracket, and brake pads. Wiggle that off of the rotor. Now you want to go ahead and take a caliper hang tool or hook or whatever you want to use here. You're going to swing that up and attach that hook to the strut spring up top that'll hold the weight off of that brake hose. Let's go ahead and grab your brake rotor, and we're going to rotate our steering back to center line. Using a T30 Torx bit, we're going to go ahead and remove this screw right here holding our rotor to the hub. If your vehicle does not have this, it is not critical to the operation. Go ahead and set that aside. Go ahead and grab your rotor, slide that off and set that aside. Using a 32mm socket, go ahead and remove your axle nut. Once you remove that axle nut, go ahead and make sure that that CV axle is loose in here. If it's not moving like this here, then the splines are stuck in the hub. You want to go ahead and just give the end of this here a bonk with a rubber mallet or something to loosen that up. On the back side of the knuckle, there's going to be three 18mm bolts that we want to remove. There's this one right here, there's one on the top, and there's one right on the other side, almost in the same position as this one here. Let's go ahead and start with this lower one. You're gonna use an 18mm socket and extension. We switched over 18mm socket, extension, and a breaker bar. Get a little more leverage on this. Let's go ahead and loosen this bolt. I'm going to loosen the top one. And then we'll move to the one on the other side. Now we're going to take these out to the point where on the front side, you'll notice that the threads are just going to start to go inside the wheel hub. We're going to loosen all three of these bolts just to that point. Now we left those three bolts in there, allowing us to come on the back side of the hub, and just want to gently tap this and work this free. When we're tapping on the hub flange itself, we're looking for the space or gap to open up between the knuckle and the hub. We can see a little bit of space there. The backing plate is loose. At this point here, you can go ahead and remove the three bolts on the back of the wheel hub. So now that we get all three of the bolts loose, I'm going to go ahead and tap some more on the hub. Just work this gently back and forth. Remember the orientation of your backing plate where the notch is towards the front, allowing for your caliper and brakes to attach. Go ahead and separate the hub and the backing plate from the axle. I'll go ahead and set these aside. Now we already went ahead and cleaned out the inside of the knuckle area here. We put our bolts in the back, we cleaned the threads, and we cleaned off the splines on our CV axle. Next, you want to go ahead and apply some anti-seize compound to these components to keep everything from sticking. Now that we spread everything down with our anti-seize compound, go ahead and get your backing plate lined up. Once you have your backing plate on, go ahead and take your CV axle or your hub, slide that onto the CV axle, and work the hub into the knuckle. You can start getting those bolts started by hand. Once you have all three of the bolts started by hand, you can go ahead and snug those down. And once you have everything snugged down, let's go ahead and torque these three bolts down to 125 foot-pounds. And repeat for the other two. I want to go ahead and get our brake rotor lined up, put that on. If you have that set screw, make sure that's lined up on the hub. Go ahead and install that and we'll snug that down. Go ahead and grab your caliper. Release it from the hook. I'll go ahead and slide the pads and the caliper back together here. We did go ahead and clean up our caliper bracket bolts and put some thread locker on those. I'll go ahead and work that caliper into place. Once you get the threads cut on that, go ahead and install the lower bolt, and then we'll go ahead and snug those down. Once this is snugged down, repeat for the upper. Let's go ahead and torque the caliper bracket bolts to 148 foot-pounds. Repeat for the upper. Let's go ahead and install our ABS sensor. I did wipe this down with a paper towel just to clean it off. Let's go ahead and install it into the knuckle. Install our 10mm bolt. Just going to thread that down as far as you can by hand. And then we'll just snug that into place. Go ahead and install your hub nut. Thread that on as far as you can by hand. I'm going to put this chisel inside the vanes of the rotor. I'm going to turn this here and let it catch and lock up against the brake caliper bracket while we hand tighten that wheel hub. Go ahead and torque the axle nut to 125 foot-pounds. Once that's tight, remove your chisel. And go ahead and get your wheel installed. I'm going to go ahead and get all of our lug nuts started by hand, and then we'll snug those down. Go ahead and torque these down to 111 foot-pounds.